Hi, I'm Ethan Marsh, and today I'm here with Esther Deans MBE, and we're going to talk about racial injustice and the changes in which she has made to the Bristol curriculum and what she hopes to globalise in efforts to make the curriculum more fun, but also educational for children of all backgrounds, races and genders. Genders. So I know you as Auntie Susie, but the other day I found out that you're Miss Esther Deans MBE, so who's doing so much. So I heard that was on BBC News Round. And what's the journey from Hackney to now MBE?
Well, I want to start off by saying thank you so much for inviting me. When my son found out, he was like, why did he invite you? And I said, well, he clearly wanted the most interesting person in the family. He was like, oh, I'm sure that's not you, Mum. But hopefully today I can change his mind a little bit. Because if you knew, our family is pretty vibrant, okay? Yeah. But I have had lots of experiences, and I've worked locally, nationally. I've been on international projects. And my big thing is about racial justice and also curriculum and education. So these are things that are very, very relevant today and that I've been working on for quite some time.
So tell us a bit more about the racial attacks, especially within Bristol.
Well, I had a real journey. I'm going to take you back a little while, okay, to my dad and your granddad, actually, came to England in the 60s. And they were real groundbreakers because England in the 60s were very different from today. You know, there was lots of racism. I know there's lots of things going on today. But they were really groundbreakers. And we had to work really hard to kind of keep our communities together. And when I went to school, it was really difficult because, unfortunately, like my lovely Hackney, which is so diverse, so lovely, and I loved being at a school in Hackney. Unfortunately, I went to Islington, and they were like, your grades are so good, that's brilliant. And they sent me to this ex-grammar school, but it was a very white area. And so every day that I went to school, I had to go past people, name calling. I'd have white friends that were with me. They would call them names as well. So I grew up understanding that there was a lot of racial tension, and it was tension that I couldn't necessarily tell my mum and dad because they would be absolutely heartbroken, and what could they do? So I was really happy that, you know, this was to get me where I really wanted to be. When I was little, I was very fortunate because my dad loved reading The Sun. I know that's not very au fait these days. My dad loved reading The Sun, and you know he did. So he used to send me off to the shop, and I was a little old baby girl, and he used to send me to the shop and look out the window, going, cross the road now. And when I'd come back, he'd sit me on his knee and he'd read The Sun to me. And my mum would read Bible stories to me. So by the time I went to school, I could already read. And I was like, well, what's the point of me being here? You're teaching them to read. So I really didn't want to go to school. But my teacher, I was so fortunate to have this wonderful black teacher called Mrs. Warner. And she said to me, well, why don't you help me to teach everybody? And, you know, through her made me want to be a teacher. So at 4 years old, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And then what happened was I had this journey of, you know, helping other people. I would help people to write letters and all that kind of stuff. And that's how I then went on to Barnsley School and then went on to university. I was the first in my family to go to university. So it was an incredible journey. I learned so many things. I went, you know, I traveled around the world, wonderful. But yet, when I came back and I did my teaching practice in Bristol, that is where I had the most horrendous racial attack that was then to go on to change my life.
So how did that change your life then? What did you do to help you get over it in that sense?
Well, when I came back to Bristol, I didn't know Bristol, and Bristol's quite segregated, so it's more segregated then. And so when I came back to Bristol, the first place I went to live, it was my friend that sorted out that place, and she was white, so she had done all of the everything. And when we went and lived there, and they realised that I was black, because I thought I can have quite a white accent if I wanted. When they realised I was black, they threw us out. So then we had to go somewhere else, and I went and I found a room somewhere else, and there was 5 of us living in the house. And they decided that when I was getting up in the morning, I was going to go to school. They had attacked my car, so they'd written the N-word all across the bonnet. They'd crossed out the windows. They had weed on the handles. They had put acid. So they'd weed on the car and put acid on the handles. So if I'd have touched it, it would burn through my skin. So it was a horrible attack, and they put me in touch with an organisation called Stand Against Racism and Inequalities. And it was through that I went to that organisation for them to help me. And then they said, hey, you know what? You can talk really well. You're really educated. You're a person that we think could really help us. Do you want to put something back in? And I was like, if I can. And I did. And then I was the chair of that organisation for the next 20 years. And we helped so many people with issues in terms of racism, advocating for them, going out to cases, working with young children. There are so many cases that people don't hear about, and they are horrendous. And sometimes when you are suffering a racist attack, you feel like it's just you, and you feel very isolated and you don't want to talk to anyone. Whereas actually what happened was, by having someone that knew about it, by having someone to support you, it helped people to get better faster, quicker. It meant that you could go to the police with them, you could advocate for them. Police took it more seriously. For children at school, we do a lot of work with young children at school. A lot of children at school suffer in silence because they have this racism going on, and it's who do they tell, because you've got a predominantly white staff. So, sometimes they do suffer in silence until it comes to the fore. And also parents who, there is still systemic racism within the education system. And so parents also need support. So there was lots of work like that I did, and I've done over an extended amount of time. And so that was where I was noticed. And I was giving speeches and things all over the place. And then I got the letter that I was going to get an MBE. And I had been nominated by somebody that was already an MBE. And he was a deputy sheriff from Bristol. And he was like, I think that you really deserve this. And so he tossed me these lovely little pearls and he said, congratulations. And I got my letter. And then I had to go and see the Queen, and I definitely wanted it to be Queen. Yeah. They were like, oh, you can have either Prince Charles and Camilla or the Queen. I was like, the Queen. Of course. The Queen. So I definitely wanted it to be the Queen. And so I went to Buckingham Palace, stupidly, because that's not where she was. And I had looked at this invite so often, and I don't know why I didn't notice that it was not Buckingham Palace. In my head, it was. So in the morning, I went to Buckingham Palace. Can you believe that? Took my son, come on, we've got to get there. Realised it wasn't there, it was in Windsor. Legged it to Windsor, having made a phone call, like, I'm on my way. And when you actually do the whole kind of thing, they get you into this little room, right? So you have to then line up, because then you're going to be presented to the Queen, and you have to line up, and then they teach you to curtsy. So before, I know Meghan was all giving it like, oh, no one's taught. Yeah, they taught me to curtsy, right? So I was out there learning to curtsy. The men had to bow properly, and then you go in, and when you go in, there's a little man by her shoulder, and they say who you are, and then she has the conversation with you, and she puts her hand out to you, and for as long as her hand is out, because you hold her hand, as long as her hand is out, she can talk to you. You can talk to her. And I was like, oh, I went to your other address and you wasn't there. So she had a bit of a giggle about that, and we talked about racial justice and all of that. And then when she takes her hands away, that is the end of the conversation. So if I talk to anybody now, that's it, I'm done. Oh. Okay, that when I've done that, that's the end. So it was the end of and then you're not allowed to turn your back on the Queen. So you have to walk backwards and then go to the side. So but I've got my little MBE, and you can get it's a big thing. So you can get like a little brooch. Yeah. That's a little bit nicer, but yeah. So it's really good.
The question is, how come you didn't tell any of the family that you got that? Because this is the first that I was
hearing.
I know.
I didn't tell the family my name was Esther either, though.
That's a good point.
And so when I remember when I was on Newsround, and this was in Black History Month, and because I'm doing all this work on the curriculum and the new curriculum and why, I'm very much about globalizing the curriculum. I know a lot of people talk about decolonizing the curriculum, but I think as soon as you say decolonize the curriculum, people get really edgy. They get really like, oh, that means you're going to change it and you're going to make it kind of strange. But when you say I'm going to globalize the curriculum and you want to be a global citizen, everyone's like, yeah, I do want my child to be a global citizen. So they're much more open to having this wider curriculum that looks at the equalities, that has people in there that looks like me. And so from there, that's why, I was on BBC News Round, and that's when all the families started to go, oh, why, what, how comes I didn't know you were called Esther Deans until now? So so that was the story. But I think it's just so important, particularly today, to look at the curriculum. If you look at a lot of education at the moment, you have, 97% of head teachers are white. You have a kind of a bit of a ceiling, because you still don't have enough black teachers in schools, and you still don't have a very diverse curriculum. And the curriculum is very similar to, I think, when I was at school. It's very similar. We were talking a bit earlier on about how many black people did you see in your curriculum?
Within the history, and then you study the civil rights, and then maybe in English with the poetry, look at black poets but it's the same people over again, Maya Angelou, people like that, Benjamin Zephaniah.
And then you don't get, all of our contributions.
Exactly.
And I think what is different about One Bristol curriculum is that it looks at having a curriculum that is diverse. So it looks at all the equality strands, because of course, black people have been missing, all those missing voices, so you've got women, you've got LGBTQ, you've got all of those voices that are not there. And so in order to be able to get a fairer curriculum, we do need to look at that. The Runnymede Trust actually, they published a report in 2017 saying that the curriculum as it is now is advantageous to some people. So if you're white middle class, that's advantageous to you, because you're seeing people that look like you. But you want children to be able to go into primary school and they're pretty proud of who they are. And this is not just a curriculum for black children. And I think we've got to be really clear about that. It's a curriculum for everybody, because what that will allow is for people to understand the contribution that, all people have made. I was so fortunate I was able to talk to Dr. Paul Stephenson about this, and he did the bus boycotts, of course, in Bristol. So he was doing a NASDAQ. He, in the 60s, he was like fighting that cause of being able to have people just to be able to be hired on the bus. I mean, he has to fight for that Equalities Act. And that Equalities Act has enabled so much more. And yet the fight is still going, because there's still inequality that exists. And part of that is the curriculum. And what we're seeing today, with lots of people being very unhappy, a lot of people don't know their history. I still have children saying to me, oh, but Britain won the war. And they're not aware that Britain was part of an empire. So you have all these Indians and Africans and people from all over the world that helped them to win the war. You have Czech people, Poles, who flew the planes for the Battle of Britain, and all of that is not out there necessarily and known in a way that it should be, to show that we have a shared history. It's not, it's not a British history, it's a shared history where all of these people contribute. And that's why all of us need to be able to find a way to learn about each other, understand each other, and that's how we will learn to respect each other. So I think it's such an important message for people to think about, how do we move forward, because we can't move back. We have come so far, and George Floyd, was a watershed. Everybody was into equalities issues and stuff, and we're seeing now that rolling back. So a lot of good work happened, and you want to kind of stop that from stopping. So yes, there's still lots of work to be done, and there's still lots of people that are doing that work, and obviously we want to get young people like yourself involved in that. You can carry that torch forward, and whatever battle that you guys will fight, you will be equipped.
And earlier you mentioned about the One Bristol curriculum. So what was your role in that, and how do you see that?
I'm one of the co-founders of the One Bristol curriculum. Yeah. So what they did was the Runnymede report talked about the curriculum, talked about education as it is now, and the fact that, there are certain issues within the education system that they felt didn't work for everybody. And so in Bristol, we took the initiative, and I worked with the mayor at the time, Marvin Rees, who is now Lord Marvin Rees, and I worked with him and many people in Bristol. And what we did was we came up with a new curriculum. And in that curriculum, this is the globalization of the curriculum, and it is for every age and every stage. So it goes from primary school or nursery all the way up. So every age and every stage. And it goes for every subject as well. Because sometimes what they want to do is they want to pigeonhole, the whole of Black history into a tiny piece of history, just history. But it shouldn't be. It should be in science. We've made huge contributions to science and maths and all of those things. And people go, oh, is it? And then you go, yeah. And we've got like websites where you can say, well, actually, if you want, some help in getting stuff in science, so Henrietta Lacks and stuff like that, why are you not teaching about her? And there's ways of being able to see people of colour that have made those contributions, and it becomes the norm.
So it's more reflective.
Absolutely. And if I had my way, they would not necessarily be a Black History Month, because I think it should be Black History 365. 365. It should be that, because it should be just embedded as part of the normal curriculum. I don't want to see people going, oh, it's Black History Month.
Yeah.
And then they look at the Black child that's in there and then they feel really embarrassed, like, why? It should be just for everyone. And in our school now, it is for everyone. Everyone loves it. They love it when we do that. And we have everything going on. And we are changing curriculums as we speak. So really, really important. But a lot of that came from my childhood in terms of growing up in a Jamaican family, and I think you probably feel the same, growing up in a Jamaican family, and we are constantly adapting all of the time. So we are, we have a public face.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking to you now, I'm speaking very nicely now, okay? And when I'm at school, you have a personality and that adapts to the culture that you're in. But we all have to walk a line where we have a public face and a private face.
Yeah.
And so when I'm at home with my family and I can relax, and, we have a different sense of humour, as you know.
That's true.
We have a very different, very Jamaican humour, very vibrant kind of culture that we are. I remember me and my sister, when we used to be younger and we used to be talking, and well, with Auntie Patsy, we'd be like getting louder and louder and louder, and people were like, oh, are you two arguing? And we're like, no, we're just really talking. And people don't really understand our culture. And I think that's part of the problem. And I was saying to you a bit earlier on, that is part of the problem, because people don't understand our culture. And so therefore they don't really understand sometimes how we are. And this can be very, very difficult, because if you are a young person going into school and people don't understand your culture. So I've seen where, the statistics are that Black boys are 4 times more likely to be excluded than any other group. And sometimes that's because they just don't understand that culture. They'd be laughing, joking, whatever, and they're like, oh, they're doing something that is, And because you quite often have in some of our schools, so you have some schools like the school I'm in now, you don't have a lot of Black children. They're seen really quickly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, that's that person. And it's like you're carrying the weight of everybody, whether you're good or bad, on your shoulders. So I think there's the kind of having to straddle that constantly whilst retaining yourself as who you are and being authentic as who you are, and and I think most people, they're going out, they want to make a difference, they want to make the world a better place, and I know that I was so fortunate to have so many people that helped me on my journey, because when I was 4, they told me, no, you'll never be a teacher. People from around Hackney, around the back streets of Hackney, they're not going to be teachers. There was no expectation. And I sometimes see that for some children, particularly for some Black children, there is no expectation for them to do well. When they're in primary schools, what you quite often see is that those same teachers that are teaching them will say, oh yeah, they're only this grade. And if they brand you as a level 5, which is only a C, in primary school, that follows you all the way through to your secondary school, and people don't realise that it follows you through. So a teacher might say, oh, well, they could only get to a level 5, which is a C. A level C can't take you into A levels, and that then cuts you off from A levels. It cuts you off from university. It cuts you off from certain.
And then it holds back your potential.
Yeah, so it's really important that we understand those figures and that we're doing something about those figures. And also, there is so much Black excellence out there that isn't always visible. And it's wonderful. And we've got amazing people in our family. We've got people in our family that are in orchestras, so we've got people in our family that are kind of breaking barriers, being one of the youngest to do their PhD. We've got people in our family that are doing, music, and we've got people in our family that are businessmen. We've got all of that, and that's just in one family. That's happening everywhere. And I think that there is a kind of a moment now we need to kind of take the bull by the horns a little bit, it and kind of really showcase Black excellence. But also, if we can get that through the education system, it means that people can be proud of who we are, but also for everybody in that classroom. So white children say, I didn't know that. That's amazing. And people kind of maybe have a kind of a feeling like, oh, it's going to be harder. But actually, no, when we've done that in school, you know, both Black and white children have been like, oh, we're learning together. We're learning about these African empires together. And they're like excited. They're like, oh, miss, come and have a look at this, you know. And I think that is so healthy that if we can have generations going forward, you know, that are more harmonious, I think that's going to be even better. So
we could say that what you've continued to do and what you continue to do, it started from home, and in that sense you had those influences growing up which laid a solid foundation for what you would progress to do.
Absolutely. I think everything in my life, and I think everybody in everyone's life, everyone's got a story in them. Everyone's story is incredible and important. Everything has led me to where I am and where I'm going, which is wonderful. And I'm really proud of some of the things that I've done.
Yeah.
I know we've only got a few minutes left, but would you like me to give some advice to young people?
Yes, I would. Yeah.
I think that should be your for everyone. You should
Yeah.
be saying to people of my age, because my son always goes, oh, you know, you people now, you're getting older, you know, you need to pass it on. But I would say for every young person, and my words of advice to you is to write your dream down and every day take a step toward it. Surround yourself with good people, because good people will not try to steal your shine. And also to look at people's energy towards you, because energy never lies, words can. So that's my
Beautiful.
words to you.
Yeah. Thank you.